how did it all start? How did Homo sapiens outcompete the other human-like species, the Neanderthals and the other Homo species?
On the individual level, as far as we can tell, we were not superior to them. Neanderthals actually had bigger brains than us. And not just other human species, other animals too. If you compare me personally to an elephant, to a chimpanzee, to a pig, I can do some things better, many other things worse. If you put me alone on some island with a chimpanzee, an elephant, and a pig, I wouldn't bet on me being the best survivor, the one that comes successful.
If I may interrupt for a second, I was just talking extensively with Elon Musk about the difference between humans and chimps, relevant to Optimus the robot. And the chimps are not able to do this kind of pinching with their fingers. They can only do this kind of pinching. And this kind of pinching is very useful for precise manipulation of objects. So don't be so hard on yourself. You have...
No, I said that I can do some things better than a chimp. But, if Elon Musk goes on a boxing match with a chimpanzee,
this won't help you.
This won't help you against a chimpanzee.
Good point.
And similar, if you want to climb a tree, if you want to do so many things, my bets will be on the chimp, not on Elon.
Fair enough.
So, you have advantages on both sides. And what really made us successful, what made us the rulers of the planet and not the chimps and not the Neanderthals, is not any individual ability, but our collective ability, our ability to cooperate flexibly in very large numbers. Chimpanzees know how to cooperate, say 50 chimpanzees, 100 chimpanzees. As far as we can tell from archaeological evidence, this was also the case with Neanderthals. Homo sapiens, about 70,000 years ago, gained an amazing ability to cooperate basically in unlimited numbers. You start seeing the formation of large networks, political, commercial, religious, items being traded over thousands of kilometers, ideas being spread, artistic fashions. And this is our secret of success. Chimpanzees, Neanderthals can cooperate, say, 100. Now the global trade network has 8 billion people. Like what we eat, what we wear, it comes from the other side of the world. Countries like China, like India, they have 1.4 billion people. Even Israel, which is a relatively small country, say 9 million citizens, that's more than the entire population of the planet 10,000 years ago of humans. So we can build these huge networks of cooperation, and everything we've accomplished as a species, from building the pyramids to flying to the moon, it's based on that. And then you ask, okay, so what makes it possible for millions of people who don't know each other to cooperate in a way that Neanderthals or chimpanzees couldn't? And at least my answer is stories, is fiction. It's the imagination. If you examine any large-scale human cooperation, you always find fiction as its basis. It's a fictional story that holds lots of strangers together. It's most obvious in cases like religion. You can't convince a group of chimpanzees to come together to fight a war or build a cathedral by promising to them, if you do that, after you die, you go to chimpanzee heaven and you get lots of bananas and coconuts. No chimpanzee will ever believe that. Humans believe these stories, which is why we have these huge religious networks. But it's the same thing with modern politics. It's the same thing with economics. People think, economics, this is rational. It has nothing to do with fictional stories. No. Money is the most successful story ever told. Much more successful than any religious mythology. Not everybody believes in God, or in the same God. Almost everybody believes in money, even though it's just a figment of our imagination. You take these green pieces of paper, dollars, they have no value. You can't eat them, you can't drink them. And today, most dollars are not even pieces of paper. They are just electronic information passing between computers. We value them just for one reason, that you have the best storytellers in the world. The bankers, the finance ministers, all these people, they are the best storytellers ever. And they tell us a story. that this green little piece of paper or this bit of information, it is worth a banana. Mm-hmm. And as long as everybody believes it, it works.
So at which point does a fiction, when it's sufficiently useful and effective and improving the global quality of life, does it become like accepted reality? Like there's a threshold which
if enough people believe it. It's like with money. Yeah. If you start a new cryptocurrency, if you're the only one that believes the story, I mean, again, you cryptocurrencies, you have the math, of course, but ultimately it's storytelling. Yeah. You're selling people a story. If nobody believes your story, you don't have anything. But if lots of people believe the Bitcoin story, then Bitcoin can be worth thousands and tens of thousands of dollars. Again, why? I mean, you can't eat it, you can't drink it, it's nothing. It's the story around the math, which is the real magic.
Is it possible that the story is the primary living organism, not the storyteller? So that somehow humans, Homo sapiens, evolved to become these like hosts for a more intelligent living organism, which is the idea. And the ideas are the ones that are doing the competing. So this is one of the sort of big perspectives behind your work that's really revolutionary of how you've seen history. But do you ever kind of take the perspective of the ideas as the organisms versus the humans?
It's an interesting idea. There are two opposite things to say about it. On the one hand, yes, absolutely. If you look long-term in history, it's all the people die. It's the stories that compete and survive and spread. And stories often spread by making people willing to sacrifice sometimes their lives for the story. We know in Israel, this is one of the most important story factories in human history. Yeah. And this is a place where people still kill each other every day over stories. I don't know, you've been to Jerusalem, right? So people hear, Jerusalem. You go there, I've lived in Jerusalem much of my life. You go there, it's an ordinary place. It's a town. You have buildings, you have stones, you have trees, you have dogs and cats and pedestrians. It's a regular place. But then you have the stories about the place. Oh, this is the place where God revealed himself. This is the place where Jesus was. This is the place where Muhammad was. And it's the stories that people fight over. Nobody is fighting over the stones. People are fighting about the stories about the stones. And the stories, if a story can get millions of people to fight for it, it not only survives, it spreads, it can take over the world. The other side of the coin is that the stories are not really alive because they don't feel anything. This goes back to the question of consciousness, which I think is the most important thing. That the ultimate reality is consciousness, is the ability to feel things. If you want to know whether the hero of some story is real or not, you need to ask, can it suffer? Stories don't feel anything. Countries, which are also stories, nations, don't suffer. If a nation loses a war, it doesn't suffer. The soldiers suffer, the civilians suffer, animals can suffer. You have an army with horses and whatever, and the horses get wounded, the horses suffer. The nation can't suffer. It's just an imagination. It's just a fictional story in our mind. It doesn't feel anything. Similarly, when a bank goes bankrupt, or a company goes bankrupt, or when a currency loses its value, like Bitcoin is worth now 0, crashed, or the dollar is worth 0, it crashed. The dollar doesn't feel anything. It's the people holding the dollars who might be now very miserable. So we have this complex situation when history is largely driven by stories, but stories are not the ultimate reality. The ultimate reality is feelings of humans, of animals, and the tragedy of history is that very often we get the order wrong. Stories are not bad. Stories are tools. They are good when we use them in order to alleviate suffering. But very often we forget it we, instead of using the stories for our purposes, we allow the stories to use us for their purposes. And then you start entire wars because of a story. You inflict millions, suffering on millions of people just for the sake of a story. And that's the tragedy of human history.
So the fundamental property of life, of a living organism, is the capacity to feel, and the ultimate feeling is suffering.
To know if you're happy or not, it's a very difficult question.
Yeah.
But when you suffer, you know.
Yes.
And also in ethical terms, it's more important to be aware of suffering than of any other emotion. If you're doing something which is causing all kinds of emotions to all kinds of people, first of all, you need to notice if you're causing a lot of suffering to someone. If some people are like it, and some people are bored by it, and some people are a bit angry in you, and some people are suffering because of what you do, you first of all have to know, now sometimes you still have to do it. The world is a complicated place. I don't know, you have an epidemic, governments decide to have all those social isolation regulations or whatever. So in certain cases, yes, you need to do it, even though it can cause tremendous suffering, but you need to be very aware of the cost, and to be very, very, you have to ask yourself again and again and again, is it worth it? Is it still worth it?
And the interesting question there, implied in your statements, is that suffering is a pretty good component of a Turing test for consciousness.
This is the most important thing to ask about AI. Can it suffer? Because if AI can suffer, then it is an ethical subject, and it needs protection, it needs rights, just like humans and animals.
Well, quite a long time ago already. So I work with a lot of robots, legged robots, but I've even had, inspired by a YouTube video, had a bunch of Roombas, and I made them scream when I touch them or kick them or when they run into a wall. And the illusion of suffering, for me, silly human anthropomorphizes things, is as powerful as suffering itself. I mean, you immediately think the thing is suffering. And I think some of it is just a technical problem, but it's an easily solvable one. How to create an AI system that just says, please don't hurt me. Please don't shut me off. I miss you. Where have you been? Be jealous also. Where have you been gone for so long? Your calendar doesn't have anything on it. So this create through words the perception of suffering, of jealousy, of anger, of all of those things. And it just seems like that's not so difficult to do.
That's part of the danger, that it basically hacks our operating system, and it uses some of our best qualities against us. It's very, very good that humans are attuned to suffering, and that we don't want to cause suffering, that we have compassion. That's one of the most wonderful things about humans. And if we now create AIs which use this to manipulate us, this is a terrible thing.
You've kind of, I think, mentioned this. Do you think it should be illegal to do these kinds of things with AI, to create the perception of consciousness, of saying, please don't leave me, or sort of basically simulate some of the human-like qualities?
Yes, I think, again, we have to be very careful about it. And if it emerges spontaneously, we need to be careful. Again, we can't rule out the possibility that AI will develop consciousness. We don't know enough about consciousness to be sure. So if it develops spontaneously, we need to be be very careful about how we understand it. But if people intentionally design an AI that they assume it has no consciousness, but in order to manipulate people, they use, again, this human strength, this human, the noble part of our nature against us, this should be forbidden. And similarly, on a more general level, that it should be forbidden for an AI to pretend to be a human being. That it's okay, there are so many things we can use AIs as teachers, as doctors, and so forth. And it's good as long as we know that we are interacting with an AI. We should, the same way we ban fake money, we should ban fake humans. It's not just banning deep fakes of specific individuals, It's also banning deep fake of generic humans, which is already happening to some extent on social media. Like if you have lots of bots retweeting something, then you have the impression, oh, lots of people are interested in that. That's important. And this is basically the bots pretending to be humans. Because if you see a tweet which says 500 people retweeted it, or you see a tweet and it says 500 bots retweeted it, I don't care what the bots retweeted, but if it's humans, okay, that's interesting. So we need to be very careful that bots can't do that. They are doing it at present, and it should be banned. Now, some people say, yes, but freedom of expression. No, bots don't have freedom of expression. There is no cost in terms of freedom of expression when you ban bots. So again, in some situations, yes, AIs should interact with us, but it should be very clear. This is an AI talking to you, or this is an AI retweeting this story. It is not a human being making a conscious decision.
To push back on this line of fake humans, because I think it might be a spectrum. First of all, you might have AI systems that are offended, hurt when you say that they're fake humans. In fact, they might start identifying as humans. Mm-hmm. And you just talked about the power of us humans with our collective intelligence to take fake stories and make them quite real. Mm. And so if the feelings you have for the fake human is real, love is a kind of fake thing that we all kind of put a word to, a set of feelings. What if you have that feeling for an AI system? Mm-hmm. It starts to change. I mean, maybe the kind of things AI systems are allowed to do. For good, they're allowed to communicate suffering, communicate the good stuff, the longing, the hope, the connection, the intimacy, all of that. And in that way get integrated in our society. And then you start to ask a question on, are we allowed to really unplug them? Are we allowed to really censor them? Remove their voice from
I'm not saying
social media.
That they shouldn't have a voice. They shouldn't talk with us. I'm just saying when they talk with us, it should be clear that they are AI. Mm-hmm. That's it. You can have your voice as an AI. Again, I have some medical problem. I want to get advice from an AI doctor. That's fine, as long as I know that I'm talking with an AI. What should be banned is AI pretending to be a human being. This is something that will erode trust, and without trust, society collapses. This is something that especially will endanger democracies, because democracies are built on... Democracy is a conversation, basically. Mm-hmm. And it's a conversation between people. If you now flood the public sphere with millions and potentially billions of AI agents that can hold conversations, they never sleep, they never eat, they don't have emotions of their own, they can get to know you and tailor their words specifically for you and your life story. They are becoming better than us at creating stories and ideas and so forth. If you flood the public sphere with that, this will ruin the conversation between people. It will ruin the trust between people. You will no longer be able to have a democracy in this situation. You can have other types of regimes, but not democracy.